Ride is doubly important in a truck, to the driver and cargo, and to the truck itself. Each of these vehicles, a Chevrolet fleet side and a Ford style side, has a charge of explosive, the equivalent of a full stick of dynamite buried under its cargo. The charges will be set off electrically through these knife switches, one on each truck. As long as the switch handle stays up, we're all right. But if road shock causes it to fall and close the circuit, watch out. A bump deliberately put in the road, and that Chevrolet is coming fast.
Well, what's the plan, Stan? Well, the first thing I wanted to do was get the valve cover buttoned down, but I have a bit of a problem. One of these hold down clamps, well, I was missing one altogether. I think I need 7 total, and I had 6. And one of them is from a small block valve cover. You can see the difference there. And it actually had orange paint on it yet. You can see it's still on the bolt. That's the wrong style as well. So, I don't have one of these later 6-cylinders at home that I can rob parts off of. So here, check this out. This is what I did to fix the problem. Now I would highly recommend a job where you have things like water jet tables and laser tables at your disposal. Here's my original part. That looks real good. Pop those out of there and away we go. Which ones are the new ones? I don't know. Well, the cover's on and looking good. So I think how the plan is going to go from here, what I want to do least is get under there and bolt on the covers and get the starter on. So I'm going to do that first. And then I'll probably move on to the left side, get everything I can on here. I won't have the carburetor done at this point, but we'll see by the end of the video however long that takes. Then I'll move to the right side, get the entire ignition system on, fuel pump, get that all hooked up, cooling system, and at that point we will be ready to fire it. So let's get busy. Okay, I've got my first inspection cover, or whatever you want to call it, this first shield on. That goes on first. It sneaks up behind the oil pan and you just hang it on with 2 bolts at that end, and then at this end the starter bolts will go through it once you get the starter on. And then after all that, you can put the main flywheel cover back on. Before you start in on me, mother, and begin to grind my gears, turn over your mind to father. He's been an old crank for years. The Jayhawker, 2020. Okay, well, that should be all I really need to do from underneath. I think I can get everything else as far as the engine's concerned from the top. So let's get back up there and we'll start in on the left side of the block. Got to get this clutch linkage pivot on here. There should be a rubber boot right here. This one was completely dried out and cracked, and I'll have to look for one, see if I can find anything that works. This thing really isn't that difficult to get off, so we can do that anytime. Now we're going to start in on the manifolds. I'm going to put my gasket in between the two, the foil part down. Slide our intake on there. And then we're only going to do the hardware. We're only going to put the hardware on finger tight. Those on. You only do this finger tight. You want all of these, when it goes up against the head, to be in single smooth line. If I tighten these down now, the intake may not be lined up perfectly with the exhaust, and you have a lot of potential for leaks then. Maybe I should chase the threads on that stud. It's kind of... Oh. Wasn't holding my mouth right. Okay, as you can see, we have 2 studs. 3 if you want to go ahead and count yourself. And then 2 dowels, and one on clear on each end. So we can just hang the old manifold assembly right on those studs. There we go. Then we got the intermediate clamps that clamp everything together. We have 2 longer ones that go clear on the ends, and then the short ones go in the center. As you can see, I just leave my manifold bare cast. These clamps, I just clean them up and leave them bare. You know, the heat's going to do what it wants to them, no matter what you put on there. So, to each his own. Now I am also missing one of these smaller clamps. I'm surprised they were running it without it, but that was the case. So for now I'm going to cinch this down. I have enough on here that it should be fine, but I am definitely going to have to track down another one of these. Now that it's hung on here, I'm going to start with these three and get them just kind of snug. I'm not going to tighten them down, and then I'll tighten down these. There are torque values in the manual for all of this, but these four in the center, unless you get really creative with a crow's foot or something on the torque wrench, you can't get a torque wrench in there. So just nice and tight. I think they wanted these at like 30 foot-pounds and this 20. So, you know, nice and tight will do it. Okay, that pretty much does it. Like I said, I'm going to find a clamp for that and get that on, but otherwise everything is tightened down, ready to go as far as the manifolds are concerned. Working on this reminds me of a couple things. My grandpa, I grew up in his shop. He ran a mechanic shop in the small town I'm from, and I grew up working with him and so forth. And he loved old Chevy 6-cylinders, and he loved dual exhaust. He loved putting dual exhaust on these things. And in fact, I have a 235 exhaust manifold at home that was his, that he had my uncle weld a second exhaust flange down here coming out, and he ran that on his early 40s Chevy pickup he used after World War II at his full-service gas station. And he kept the manifold tucked away, and he gave it to me before he passed away. I would love to have a project car with an old 235 or 216 and put that exhaust manifold on there. Well, I looked this weekend online and could not find even used hold-down clamps for this generation of Chevy 6-cylinder. The only thing I was able to find online was a shop that machines them out of solid stock, and they will sell you whole sets. And I don't really feel like buying a whole set just for this. Maybe it'd be worth it at this point. But this thing is perfectly symmetrical, and I think I can cut one out of 1/2-inch bar stock and make a perfectly acceptable clamp. So I'm just going to mark, maybe a transfer punch would be better there. Mark that out, and with, I think, just an angle grinder with a cutoff wheel and drill press, I'll be able to make one. Well, what do you think? Not too bad. I ground out the backside. They're cupped anyway, so that'll give a little spring to that. We'll hopefully lock it in. That ought to work just fine. Now my alternator was shot for this. The bearings were completely shot, and when I spun it, I could feel the something was hitting inside. It was not a smooth rotation in there. And these are cheap enough. I didn't feel the need to rebuild it. You know, that's just not cost effective for doing this for a customer. If it was a ultra rare part, then yeah, you'd want to rebuild it. But for this thing, hey, so many cars used them, and I just it doesn't make sense to charge a customer to rebuild an alternator when you can get these as cheap as you can. So I need to run to the parts store and get that. However, I'm going to continue on with the front of the engine and the cooling system. I had a viewer recently comment that he was told by an old mechanic friend of his, when in doubt, Permatex. And I think I want that on my grave, on a t-shirt. I should put it on my page, on my YouTube page, you know, just everywhere. When in doubt, Permatex. I just Permatexed myself into a corner there. Should have gotten both bolts ready. So this old radiator had a severe incontinence problem right around here, and I gave the owner 3 options. I could have it fixed, we could get a new aluminum one, or stay with the copper brass original style. He chose the copper brass radiator from Summit. Well, I chose it. It's SUM 38 2002. I'll get you a close-up look at this, and then we'll open that and see what it looks like. So there you go, obvious signs of a leak. You've got the green copper corrosion all over this corner. Pretty sure the top tank was just leaking. And if you wanted to fix it, no doubt a shop would just resolder the top tank. Test it and away you go. Now overall, it looks to me like it's pretty good. In my opinion, means nothing. It's slightly smaller sideways, widthwise, exactly the same height, and it is actually about a 1/4 inch narrower, the tanks. So that's something that you may want to consider. Now, an inconsistency I see, and I recognize this is more of a kind of a universal radiator, although it said it should fit this truck. The top hose port on the old one is slightly smaller. This one's bigger. The bottom ones are roughly the same size. This one has your ports for your transmission cooler lines. We're running a manual, so I'll just leave those plugged. Petcock is of a newer design, and it's on the opposite side of the radiator. Shouldn't matter any, but perhaps something to consider. The style of the top tank matches exactly. Just like I said, it's just a little bit narrower. So I think it'll work just fine, especially considering we're running the stock engine. I don't need any more cooling power than the stock radiator. It'll work just fine. Okay, before you put your radiator in, make sure you have all the little radiator mounts accounted for. These are actually nice, soft, bendable, pliable. They're in great shape. I just cleaned them up a bit. It'll work fine. So 2 go in the bottom. Like so, and then in that top mount, 2 go in there. We'll slide the radiator in, and then we'll bolt it on. Okay, despite this being a little narrower, that's still pretty solid. I think that'll work. Come on. Okay, I am going to hook up the wires temporarily for running the engine the first time. One of the next projects on this truck will be a completely new wiring harness, but I want to be able to start it and test drive it before that. So get this going. That's about it. Now before I drop the distributor in, I'm going to want to spin the oil pump shaft there and prime the engine. So we're going to put oil in it. And the oil I'm using, never used it before, this particular. I'm going to use Lucas break-in oil, high zinc. So hopefully that'll do a good job for us. Alright, so I'm going to use my extension and screwdriver bit to spin the oil pump over down in there. Now just for fun, so I know I have oil pressure, I've hooked my ohm meter up to the oil pressure sensor, and right now there's continuity going through, so that's when your oil light would be on. When that goes to out of limits, when it goes to no continuity, I know that switch is opened up, meaning there's oil pressure in there. I would probably be able to feel it anyway in the drill, but visual aids are exciting. So here we go. Okay, it's at 0.7. Oh yeah. Out of limits. Really bogged the drill down. See how long it takes to lose oil pressure. There she goes. It's just immediate once you crank on it. So, very good. I knew that would happen. Got to fish my bit out of there now. So let's talk about the hows and whys of setting our distributor. Now we have number 1 still at top dead center firing. So obviously we want our distributor at number 1. Okay. Well, on these 6 cylinders, it's quite simple. You have a mark. You should have 4 screw holes. 2 are being used for the cap. And the points are opening, just opening, right there. It just starts to open right at that screw next to the vacuum advance. Okay? That's going to be our number 1. You want the vacuum advance pointing at an angle over the top of the filter, oil filter. Alright? Now that means we have to get that oil pump in line with this. So if we look down there, I'll try and get you down there. I don't know if you can see the slot down there. Here we go. We're going to turn that with a screwdriver until it roughly matches the angle on the distributor. So that's pretty good. Now this gear, in order to begin to engage the distributor gear onto the camshaft gear, it's going to turn. I'll show you what I mean, and then I'll pull it back out and we'll correct it. See it turn backwards? Now I'm all the way down. I'm completely engaged in the oil pump, but it turned backwards. So we're going to lift it up, turn it this far this way. It doesn't want to engage all the way down. That's because of that oil pump. I had it lined up where it will end up. Okay? So what I want, turn it a little bit farther. Okay, so here's where I ended up. The slot in the oil pump shaft is about like that. Okay? They're straight towards the block. It's about like that. And you don't want to forget your gasket. Get your gasket on there. I'm going to put a little assembly lube just so it has something. Okay. I'm going to roughly point it just after that screw. When I line our cap up, 1 and 5, this is 1, this is 5, is roughly straight in line towards the block, if not in a line towards number 1. So that's pretty good position. Number 1 just starts to open right there. So I should be able to get plenty of advance on that. And like I said, this should really be pointing over at an angle above the oil filter. You see pictures online, guys have them every which way, and that's fine, it'll work. I just like them to be correct. So I'll get this clamped down loosely for now, and we'll move on. Okay, they're all gapped to 35. You guys put this stuff on yours? Sure beats stripping threads, I'll tell you that. Okay, I wanted to finish up with the cooling system, just recapping everything that I had to do. The top, I said, looking at it, seemed larger than the original, which it is. And you can see I had to swell the hose. I just put a little lube on there and it was able to go on easy enough. I don't really like that, but it's how it is. Then the other problem I had was the original barb on the water pump must have been 3/4. Every pump you can buy, it's 1 inch. And this is 3/4 going to the heater core. Excuse me, this one. But I can't find a 3/4 barb on the pump, or a pump, I should say, with 3/4 barb on it. They're all 1 inch. On the old hose, let's see if I still have it here. No, I don't. The old hose was swelled on the pump end to get it over, so this problem was already existent, you know, back who knows when. Probably the 80s, who knows when the pump was last changed. But more than likely, Chevrolet made a change to the water pump sometime after the 60s on the 292, and they went up to 1 inch, and every pump, new pump that's been cast since then has been a 1 inch pump. And I didn't want to put an adapter in here from 1 inch to 3/4, because then I'd have a splice and you're asking for a leak there. So I lubed this up and I was able to get it on. I didn't hear any stretching and popping in the hose. So I'm gonna run with it like this. Again, don't like it, but I think I'd like a splicer or an adapter even less. So if anyone knows of a good solution, if anyone knows of a source for a pump for these things with a 3/4 outlet, let me know. Other than that, the lower hose worked great, no problems there. The only other issue I would say I have with this radiator is on this particular instance, the old overflow hose went back, not forward, and the cap tab doesn't quite line up. Usually that looks a little better. I tried to find a new octagonal or hexagon shaped cap so that these tabs didn't look quite so funny, but apparently Gates has switched to this style again, and it'll be fine. Well, I think I'm just about as far as I'm going to go on this video. I'm sorry guys, I want to fire this thing up so bad, but unfortunately that's going to take a little bit. Carburetor's at home completely torn apart. Probably the next video on this project you'll see is rebuilding the carburetor. I'm going to hook all the wiring, the old nasty dirty wiring, back up for a test run. Fuel line, coolant, battery and cables should be ready to fire it. So if you want to keep up with me, you know where to find me. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
And that Chevrolet is coming fast. Chevrolet crosses it safely. Here comes the Ford. Hold your breath. And just in case you're wondering if there really is a charge of explosive in that Chevrolet, here's your answer. Though the explosive charge was the same in each vehicle, The Ford tailgate has been blown out by the blast and the floor buckled, while the strong wood floor and double-walled construction of the Chevrolet tailgate and sidewalls show almost no damage at all.